All right, I think we're going to get started because we don't want to lose time to have this discussion. And I want to say a special hello to folks watching us from home. I'm going to start with a quote from Mary Hooks, who is the co-director of Southerners on New Ground out of Atlanta, Georgia. Every day, an average of 700,000 people are condemned to local jails and separated from their families. Our very survival and the survival of future generations depends on our willingness to take collective risks. Bailing out Black people is not a direct service. It is an invitation into something bigger than ourselves. We are out to change policy, hearts, and minds, deepen our relationships with our communities, build new systems and institutions, and move toward abolition and liberation. So welcome to the Anatomy of a Bailout panel discussion. For those who do not know me, I am Leslie Mack. I'm one of the lead organizers from Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism. And before I invite our wonderful panelists to the stage, I wanted to just talk for a few minutes about what bail efforts are, why they're happening, and more specifically, their direct connection to our Unitarian Universalist faith. I have been a Unitarian Universalist for almost 10 years now, and the beginning of my UU faith journey started in Cherry Hill, New Jersey as a member of UUCCH. My first social justice work within this faith was part of the Unitarian Universalist Legislative Ministry of New Jersey, and as the Spirit would have it, that work was also on bail reform in the state of New Jersey. I mention this so you understand that this work has been going on in this faith for far longer than just these more recent bailout efforts and the development of a national end money bail movement. As was true when I started this bail work, our UU principles call me to this specific work continually. In particular, our first two principles. Our first one, which is the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and the second, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. These bailout days that are happening all over the country are rooted in the history of Black liberation, where enslaved and free Black people would collect their resources to purchase each other's freedom. And so until we abolish mass incarceration, and we will continue to find ways to get our people free. I'm going to invite our panelists up in just one moment, but I want to issue a challenge to everyone listening. As you hear their stories and their perspectives today, I ask you to do two things. One is to really listen to the real-life experiences of our panelists to better understand how our carceral system affects them and their communities. And two, I really want you to think about what talent, time, and treasure you and your congregation at home would be useful in supporting the end money bail efforts that are happening in your home community. So if those two things, you can continually come back to them as we engage in this discussion, that would be really, really amazing. I want to give a special thank you to Side with Love and Love Resists, who have partnered with BLUU to push forward a long-term strategy to build more work ending money bail within the UU faith. And you'll be able to hear lots more of that in the coming months, including a special congregational toolkit that we'll be putting together with Love Resists to help congregations engage in this work more meaningfully moving forward. Without further ado, I will start by introducing Justice Gaston, who is a social justice doula and also from the Reale Justice Network. She's a domestic violence advocate, public speaker, and community organizer from Kansas City, Missouri. Born Janae Gaston, she was given the name Justice by the community due to her unwavering commitment to justice and equity. She's founder of the Reale Justice Network and Social Justice Doulas International, who recently organized both the Mother's Day Bailout in Kansas and Missouri, and also the most recent Father's Day Bailout. Justice is a sister doula at Uzazi Village, where she attends births and teaches childbirth education while working to eliminate Black infant mortality and Black maternal death. Let's give a warm welcome to Justice. Come on up. Our next panelist is Ak Black, formerly known as Thomas Bowers. Ak is a domestic violence advocate in Kansas City whose goal is to provide transitional living space for survivors fleeing abusive situations. As a core leader of Reale Justice Network, Ak is instrumental in the Child Recovery Program, as well as managing security and logistics. He played a key role in the Kansas City bailouts and advocates for an end to cash bail and pre-trial trial detention. As a legal observer with the ACLU of Missouri, Ock spent time in St. Louis observing police activity for constitutional violations during uprisings in response to the Jason Stockley not guilty verdict. Ock is a formerly incarcerated black man who has spent a total time in 7 prisons and nearly 50 jails throughout the country, many times for reasons that can only be described as discriminatory. Ock hopes to help others navigate the criminal justice system, and we're so excited to have him with us for this panel. Come on up, Ock. Our third panelist is Pastor L.J. Braxton. The first thing that comes to mind when talking about L.J. is his family, as they are his pride and joy. He would be one of the first to tell you that when he married Kelly, the love of his life, she was absolutely out of his league. They have been blessed with 4 children, ranging in age from 3.5 months to 8 years of age. He's also president of his family reunion board, which has been going on annually for 53 years. When not with his family, LJ spends time as a local minister and a small business owner. He does front-end web developing and landscaping, and his ministry extends to all aspects of life, including his family, his business, and his daily interactions. He's an open book and would rather get to know you through conversations rather than through simply reading about him. And he's going to talk today with us about the detriment of youth detention in the state of Missouri. Come on up, LJ. Thank you. And our final panelist is Antonia Osler, who hails from a proud lineage of freedom fighters who have helped lead the Back to Africa movement in Liberia in the 1800s. He's an activist and core member of a Black-led organization in Springfield, Missouri. At 15, Antonio started fighting the system after learning that a privately owned juvenile wilderness camp in Mansfield, Arkansas, OWI, where he and the other youth were abused and tortured by staff, had been shut down by the state and fined for the abuses they inflicted. Over the last decade, Antonio has spent thousands of dollars on bonding out of jail. Through his own personal testimony, Antonio sheds light on how fabricated civil complaints force innocent people into the criminal justice system, and he shares the tremendous impact that trying to navigate the system has had on his family and why it's important to support movements like those working to end pretrial detention. Come on up, Antonio. Okay, so I want to give us some statistics a little bit about what's been done so far. I mentioned earlier that every day over 700,000 people are in local jails, separated from their families, who have not been convicted of anything. They're awaiting trial. So they are innocent, right, until proven guilty, allegedly. The national bailout work that has been done so far has raised almost $1 million. They've spent $622,000. $622,125, so over $500,000 in bailing people out thus far. And they have 20 partner organizations, and this movement has started to grow even further. So the first question I actually want to throw over to my friend Justice, and I want to ask her, why end money bail?
I hope we're going to pull this a little closer to me. I'll make sure you all hear what I have to say. So why end money bail? Because it is an unjust and unfair system. That's why we need to end it. Right now, it is a pay-for-play system. If you have some money, you can get out of jail, you can bond out, and you can take care of things on the outside. If you don't, you are stuck in there, and all kinds of things start happening to your life. So we definitely need to end this unfair system that has a detrimental impact on so many families.
Thank you, Justice.
You're welcome.
And as we're doing the questions, I will be directing them to each of you, but if you have anything to add, feel free to jump in. We can have an open conversation as well. So one statistic that's also really important to note is that Black people are twice as likely to be held pretrial as white folks. So we know that Black and brown people are most of that 700,000 each day that I mentioned earlier. And as Justice said, the things that happen to you when you can make bail versus can't are pretty significant. And some of the effects of just being in jail include, of course, psychological trauma, displaced housing, loss of your children, loss of job, and sometimes even death, as we know in stories like Khalif Browder out in New York. So I want to have Antonio talk a little bit and give some insights into his own personal experiences with pretrial incarceration, and especially around the effects that it had on your family and on your community. We'd love for you to share some more about that.
Well, I would mainly like to speak on. Excuse me. I would mainly like to speak on the effects it had on my education. I started college in January of 2010 with a no high school diploma or GED. That first semester, I received a 4.0. My second semester, I received my GED, and I was asked by one of my professors to represent the college in a state competition for media production. About 2 months after that, well, 2 months prior to state competition, I was sitting in the Greene County Jail for 45 days. My charges were marijuana was in my system 2 months prior to that date. I ended up, my GPA dropped because I missed a lot of my finals to 3.6, and from that point on, I found myself using my school checks to keep myself out of jail. Since then, I'm in debt over $60,000 with no degree, but I have learned to represent myself in state court and federal court. At this point, it has not provided me with the relief that I would like, but it has kept me free.
Thanks, Antonio. Ak, do you have anything to add? I just wanted to hear a little bit from you about the work that you do with folks as they're trying to get out, and how the effect of being in, like what are they missing? What kind of detrimental effects have you seen to these communities and the families?
Basically just mirroring what he said. The effects are great. There is definitely loss of jobs. There is loss of homes. You see, I have myself personally have lost a few houses because of, for lack of better wording, lack of money. I have been incarcerated over 50 times in county jails for a lot of unjust stops. Now, mind you, I will say that all of them I wasn't innocent on, but for the most part, they were unjust stops. There's one time in particular that I've lost my house because I was pulled over for, well, I was in the passenger seat, and my friend was pulled over, and they came down to the passenger side and asked for my license. I didn't have a license, and they locked me up for driving without a license, and I wasn't even driving. Actually, the car was actually in a parking lot, and the car wasn't even moving. My bond was $500. I had $500 on me, but they wouldn't allow me to get it in my persons to pay myself out. So I stayed in jail for 4 months. I lost my job, my house, couldn't pay my car payment, and when I finally did get to court, they dropped the charges and just let me go. So this is just one of the many, many, many stories of cash problems in the judicial system. And usually it's very minor offenses that turn catastrophic and turn people's lives upside down. Mere misdemeanors, $100 bonds, $50 bonds. You can't pay it. You have to sit in court, sit in jail for months and months. I've been in jail for a year one time. I had a court date 30 days out. I didn't see my public defender for 6 months. They continued it without me even seeing him. I was just stuck in jail. And when I finally got to him, I had to plea because I had no money. I've been in there 6 months, and frankly, they just beat me down. And like I said, this is just one story. This is just one story of many people.
Thank you, Ak. Thanks for sharing that. As mass incarceration has taken root and the bail industry's influence has grown, more and more people are being held than ever before while being on trial. I'll share a quick story myself. As when I was doing the bail reform work that I mentioned in New Jersey, we had a series of hearings. We were getting some things on the actual ballot in New Jersey. And so we had people come and share their individual stories to speak to the legislature. And I remember myself thinking, who is going to come and argue against letting people who haven't been convicted out of jail? Like, what is the argument that we would hear? To my surprise, the bail bondsman industry showed up to speak. And they said quite specifically to the legislature, this will hurt our bottom line, and your tax dollars will go down. They were putting an actual monetary number before the legislature to either allow this on the ballot or not. And it was a real eye-opening experience for me to hear them speak so callously. Even after listening to stories like Ox and like Antonio's, they still were talking about dollars and cents. From 1990 to 2009, more and more people charged with felonies have been required to pay more money bail for their release. This has grown from 37% to 61%. And the percentage of people released on their own recognizance has plummeted. Using for-profit bail is the most common form of release. That's just what everybody has, that has become the norm in our criminal justice system. And since 1990, courts' use of for-bail profit has doubled, going from 24% in 1990 to 49% by 2009. More than 95% of cases result in a guilty plea, because what happens, as Ak just mentioned, is that police, prosecutors, and judges use money as leverage to force folks into guilty pleas. When we post bail, though, through our bailout efforts, most cases are dismissed. Okay? This particular issue extends into youth detention centers as well, often positioned publicly as alternatives to jail. They're actually just jail with less oversight and more harm to our youth. Pastor LJ, I'm going to turn the floor over to you for a few minutes to talk about how detention affects our youth and also about the lasting effects of decisions made in youth detention by our young people, because as Ox said, he didn't have public defense. You can only imagine how little oversight and defense that our youth gets in these same situations. So I'm going to just let you talk a little bit about that.
Okay. So over these last few months, I haven't had a chance to grieve. I was very intentional about the shirt that I wore today because it's representing my sister-in-law who was actually killed by an abusive boyfriend. What does that have anything to do with me and all of this? Well, they also had a daughter. The night when my sister-in-law was killed by him, my niece was in the house. And it's funny, just literally a few weeks ago, the Kansas City Police Department, they were talking about how often, how sad they were when they would ever see, when they would see a child that was a victim of these types of situations. Well, this night, after my sister was murdered, her father and my sister-in-law's boyfriend laid down the gun, and in that time, my niece was able to pick up the gun. At that point, when he actually came after her, she inevitably became an orphan within minutes. So, of course, what we're told is that, first of all, nobody in my family has a history of dealing with this. We don't have any type of criminal history to know how these things work. And so, we just rely on what we're told inevitably by the police growing up. It's like, hey, just cooperate with the police and, we're going to do what's best for you. And that's exactly what we did. Anything that they needed, anytime that they wanted to interview her or whatever, we showed up for everything. she told the truth. And I remember my father-in-law specifically saying, he's like, especially in a case like this, if you just tell the truth, then it'll come out right and come out on top. And that's what we did. Well, the event was April 9th this year. About a month later, it was her father's birthday. And despite all of this, she wanted to celebrate his birthday. And a lot of us, we had feelings about that, but for her, we did that. Well, the very next day, the police actually wanted to interview her and did so. In cooperating with the police, we took her to interview with them again. And after questioning was shut down, they took my niece out in cuffs. They arrested her not only for the murder of him, but also for the murder of her mother, which was inevitably her best friend. More background, this man has been abusing her for years. I actually personally hotlined him a few years ago because of the abuse that she had been going through and that we had personally witnessed. And they didn't do what was best in her best interest, which inevitably would have been to remove her from the home. My wife and I were actually ready to take care of her at that point, and but they didn't. But not only that, now she has been re-victimized and now is arrested for that. Well, tying in with this right here, now we go to our first court date. We're approached by a man that we had no idea what was going on, but it was just a random person. He told us that he was the juvenile officer, and inevitably told us that he was inevitably like an advocate for her or an intermediary for her, and so on and so forth. But luckily, I actually had spoken with Justice for the first time the night before, and she had, told me a few things to expect, a few things to do, a few steps to take. One of those being that, like psychological evaluations in situations like that need to be done on the side of the defense. Well, going back to the day we were speaking with the juvenile officer, one of the things that he told us, and he was literally going from family to family. We just happened to be one of the next family that he had called. He was like, okay, yeah. So, we're just here. We just need a few things, just need you to sign a few things, such as, we have this consent to treat, and this is just, in case something happens here, she gets sick or something like that, or she needs a psychological evaluation, something like that. This gives us permission to do so. Well, after speaking with Justice, that kind of released a little bit of a red flag to me, and I'm like, you know what? With that being said, I'd much rather speak with our public defender, our attorney once he gets appointed. And he's like, oh, no, it's not a big deal. It's just, whatever. Inevitably, I'm like, yeah, that's the same thing that the police said, and look where we are now. Funny thing, that same person, half an hour later, was in the courtroom with us. He was not on the side of the defense. He was on the side of the prosecution. And he inevitably was the one who recommended that she be remanded. So we're talking about cash bailout. The juvenile system here in Missouri doesn't work like that. We don't have they don't have the opportunity for cash bailout. Instead, how it works is the juvenile officer makes a recommendation. The prosecutor inevitably goes with that recommendation, and then the judge inevitably goes with what the prosecutor recommends. And we actually met with the defense attorney about five minutes after we met with the juvenile officer, and he said he inevitably prepared us for it. He said, this is pretty much what's going to happen. He's like, I'm going to make a plea and at least try, but inevitably it's going to be a formality because this is how it works. So, I'd almost like a cash bail system or, to be able to have the opportunity for bail because at least maybe we could start a GoFundMe and hopefully people would donate to it. But there is not that opportunity. My niece, I've spoken with her twice since she's been incarcerated. That day at the court date, my niece, she couldn't even look up at us. We had a handful of us family members that were there to support her, and she couldn't look up at us because she felt ashamed after being accused for the murder of her father and her best friend, her mother. Sadly but surely, this whole innocent till proven guilty thing, none of the evidence goes into the decision on whether or not to release her, although it goes into the decision on whether or not to remand her. So inevitably, there's one person that gets to decide whether or not my niece gets to go free, and there's nothing we can do about it, even until trial.
Thank you. Thank you so much, LJ. We're going to come back to you again in a minute. I want to go back to Justice for just 1 second. And Justice, could you talk a little bit about, you ran the first bailouts here. Mm-hmm. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about the after effect. I know I spend a lot of time with Justice. We've been working together for about 6 months now to put a lot of the public witness actions together. And there's not a time I'm with her where one of the folks that she's bailed out hasn't called her or she's not calling them. So can you talk a little bit about what happens once someone is out of jail, you've bailed them out, and what happens from that point forward? What kind of system are they committing themselves to continue to be a part of? Because I think there's a misconception that once you're bailed out, you're free.
You know, that was one of the things that was really important to me. It wasn't about let's bail people out, because we can bail out. But I wanted to keep out, too. So with our bailout, it was the bailout / keep out. And so part of that is part of what I do as a social justice doula. Because I'm a labor and delivery doula. I'm there when the babies are born. So all that love and care that I do to take care of mamas and families, I marry that with the work that I do as an organizer. And I look at everything through the lens of generational trauma, racial injustice, acknowledging that those are very real experiences that these people have. And so that meant that I can't just bail you out. I have to find out what got you in there. Let's take care of that. And then let's empower you to do this work to help somebody else. So this is becoming a network. And, you know, it takes some time to get to there because I'm talking about people who have lost a lot. We have a mother, she was 7 months pregnant, had 3 babies in the car when she was put in handcuffs in front of her children and put in jail. Over, I believe it was a tail light for her car. I believe that's what it was, or some tag. It was something very minor. It was a tag. So we took care of her tag. That situation left her homeless and sleeping on her friend's couch. She is now very close to delivering her baby. And we have been looking for shelter for her. She works. She's a CNA. She works every day. And so she's located a place. We are going to hopefully have enough money by Monday to give her $550 for her first month's down. She's going to be able to continue that. But it's important for her to get into a place, get situated. We're providing services for her and the baby. I'm going to be at that birth. I'm going to be her doula. And so we are going to continue to take care of her and her family until she gets to a place where she's strong enough to do this work as well. And not just her, but the other young ladies too, who we bailed out. The young men that we're helping out. So, yes, it's not just bail you out. We definitely want to keep you out, but we also want you to empower you to do this work, but also carry this to the next phase, because we don't want to just keep on bailing people out, and giving the system money. We need to end the policies. And so that's where we're at right now, working on ending the policies. So, Leslie, whenever we have time, I can talk about that.
We're coming to that
okay.
soon enough. Don't you worry.
Okay.
Soon enough. I want to go back to Antonio for just 1 second. Antonio, you're a dad. Yes? Yes. I want to talk to you a little bit about kind of the effects that it's had on your personal family. This notion, and I think one of the things that I've spoken to lots of folks that have been in this position is that there's a fear, a level of fear, right, and apprehension that you have to just deal with continually. Right. It's like repeated trauma. And so I want to just talk a little bit about how that is for you, for your children, for your wife.
Well, you have to look at it like this. Yeah, I'm sorry. You have to look at it like this. The average bond on a minor but serious charge is about $10,000. So that means you'll pay $1,000 to get out of jail. And if you bond out of jail, you are not qualified for a public defender. So now you have to pay for an attorney. After you pay for an attorney, that's about, on the low end, about $3,500. In my case, was sitting in jail for 45 days. It was, I spent $2,000 on commissary. That was for phone cards and snacks. So before you ever get to see a judge or ask for a discovery to find out if they even have probable cause to take you to jail, you've spent over $4,000, $5,000. The average person does not have this amount of money laying around. And what you end up doing is taking money from your family. That's why we're hearing so many stories about people losing their homes and their cars, because this money has to come from somewhere. And most people that's in these situations can't just go to the bank and get a loan. The effect that it has on the children, for one, your absent parent. And for two, you have to explain to your child why you were absent. There is a stereotype with black people in jail, and it's like it's something normal, but it's not. It's been made to appear that way through the systematic racism and the white supremacy that we face with the judicial system. My children, with all of the times that I have been to jail, it has affected our relationship as far as how they look at how I can provide. Because they don't know, I might just go to jail one day. I've had situations where I've been taken to jail for crimes that it has been proven to the court never even happened. The prosecutor manufactured and fabricated probable cause to bring charges, and we have to bond out. That's money to the court, and then there's money to the lawyer, and then that's all if you sit in jail, the money for commissary that you spend. So you're taking all of this outside of your home, away from our children, and then they are being left with these scraps, whatever we have left over, and that includes our time and our money. So it's very important that we address this issue in some kind of way where, if at the very least we do is try and protect the kids. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Antonio. Yes, absolutely.
So he said, as far as, well, first of all, he just told me something as far as if you bail out that you don't qualify for a public defender. That's actually something that's fairly important to me because my niece, they still haven't made the decision yet, but if they charge her as an adult, if she's charged as an adult, then this bail conversation would go into effect. How old is she? She's 15. And she was finishing up on her freshman year in high school. So she very well could be charged as an adult. If she's charged as an adult, then yes, we'd love to bail her out. But I've actually contacted a few lawyers prior to this, and the lawyers that I've spoken with, the going rate for a lawyer for a case like this was about $25,000. Raise your hand if you have $25,000 sitting around. That's just for the retainer, and it goes up from there. So, as you know, there are positives and negatives somehow for being charged as an adult. But if she gets charged as an adult, at the very least, she gets a jury trial, because as a kid, she doesn't. She somehow she doesn't get that constitutional right. But good to know that if she's charged as an adult, we can bail her out, but we can very well lose our public defender, because that's another $25,000 that we have to find somewhere.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to add something to that about the public defender system too. So, right now, I can tell you right here in Missouri, at work, we've sued our public defender system for not providing zealous defense.
So can I just, when you say at work, Justice works for the ACLU of Missouri. So when she says at work, that's what she means by they sue.
So, yes, the ACLU of Missouri, we've had to. Because I'll tell you, so to try a murder case, an attorney's going to need about 108 hours, about average. Our public defenders are using about 80. For a misdemeanor case, an private attorney is going to spend about 11 hours. Our public defenders are spending about 2. And that's a large pool when we talk about misdemeanor offenses. What we are finding is that they are meeting people for the very first time and pleading them out. Meet and plead, no matter if they're innocent or not. They don't have the resources to fight the cases. They don't have the money to call in expert witnesses. They are not doing the tests that they need to do. They're just not. And as our legislature closed out, they still didn't provide the adequate amount needed to run the public defender system in Missouri. So even if you do get a public defender, you probably will not get the best legal care. And I'll say this, that we have some great public defenders, but they cannot provide a zealous defense if they have 100 cases. And they know that as well. They are upset about this. They want to be able to do their job correctly, but they know under the current system they can't. So it is really a mess, but I wanted to say that.
Piggybacking, I've spoken with our public defender, my niece's public defender, a few times, and she's very right about that. Yeah, I mean they've talked about, the lady that I have pretty much handles any high-profile murder case like this because of their lack of resources. They have a handful of attorneys in the office, and all of them are overwhelmed. There's just not enough of them. Like she said, there's not enough resources. They've actually talked to me and asked that, if I knew that they were being sued, and of course, knowing Justice, I know that. But they also absolutely understand why. The court system is strongly skewed towards the prosecution. The tax dollars, the dollars that go into the system, the prosecution gets anything that they need. The public defender, when she goes to meet with my niece, she gets a small little room that she gets to meet in. She can't bring anything in there with her. No phone, no laptop, no paper to take notes. No. When she checks into the juvenile detention center, she has to check anything of hers, just as if she's any other regular visitor, and cannot take anything. But on the other hand, if it's a police officer or a prosecutor, they can check their weapon and bring in whatever else they need to. That's not right. Absolutely not right. So as far as so again, it's skewed towards the defender. My niece, first of all, we still have not signed that consent to treat. But what does that sadly mean for my niece? The only psychologist, my niece lost both of her parents a couple of months ago. As much as we would love for her to meet with a psychologist or psychiatrist in there, one thing that the public defender also let us know is the fact of those people that are supposed to be there advocating and taking care of the children, that whole doctor-patient confidentiality, the HIPAA, the privacy stuff that you have to sign anytime you go into a doctor's office, that stuff goes out the window. So when it comes down to, these people think that, the people that are there are helping them out and they're here to help them and they're talking to them. Well, then when it comes to their court date, those same people then will testify against them on what they talked about. Okay, so my niece, these last few years, or the majority of her life, she's had to suffer all of this abuse and silence. And now when she absolutely needs to talk to someone, she can't talk to anyone until, the public defender gets maybe a forensic psychiatrist or forensic psychologist to talk to her, because the people that are there are not for her benefit. That's how skewed it is. Okay, everything is skewed towards the prosecution, and my niece has to. She's literally being told to keep her mouth shut because she has to.
Thank you. So, just as you mentioned that the bailouts are not the end of the road, they're actually part of a three-pronged strategy focused on public education, direct action, community mobilization, and strategic policy intervention. So key to our strategy is building the power of local organizations like the Reale Justice Network through base building, raising the awareness in our communities through political education. That's why we're talking about this today with all of you. And then finally, developing policy interventions that ensure reforms to money bail honor the dignity of our people and do not cause additional harm. Because as anybody knows, when you're dealing with legislation, it's very easy to attack one devil and another one pops up in the midst of you fixing the issues that you're looking at. So, Justice, can you talk a little bit about what's been happening policy-wise here in Missouri and kind of what work's been going on around that?
So just what you said is what we've been toiling with, because, when somebody thinks they have a great idea, then I can go in and find some way how that's going to actually hurt us even more. So that's where we're at right now. It's that beginning of, okay, what do we replace this with? Now, I have some thoughts, I think we need to remember our power. We need to remember that. I've been talking a lot about relationship and the position that people are in and what we pay for. What is in our personal budgets, what we're paying for. We've got to realize that we are paying for this and we're responsible for this. These employees that we have gone rogue, and we have to be responsible and reel them back in. And that's in all of these systems in which tax dollars fund. That's with our city councils. That's with our legislature. We have to remind them who's the boss. So, fixing policy, making changes. When LJ talks about how skewed the juvenile injustice system is. When we talk about resources and we say we don't have resources, that's actually not true. We have resources, we just don't use them well. The money that the prosecution uses is our money. We're not using our money well. We got to find a way to call these rogue employees. You know what? We need to fire these rogue employees and put people in place that's going to do what the boss says do. So when you got to go back home and think about how you can attack that. One of the things that we are starting to do, which is really important, is talk to all of our district attorneys. And so we have, I asked my intern, put them all on a spreadsheet for me, find all of them, see who's up for re-election, who's opposing them, find out what their values are, find out all of them. And she was like, okay. And so we have 115. They all have phone numbers and offices. Got about, we can pair up and go and see them. These are the things I'm talking about. It's time for this. So calling people in, finding out what their policies are and what they believe in. Because right now, as it stands, district attorneys go unchecked. Do you know who the district attorney is in your area? That person holds all the power. I could keep on. But okay. So, prosecutorial reform, definitely. We want to talk about the bail, ending cash bail. I like to see an end to cash bail for all misdemeanor offenses, for all of them. There's no need for us to be locking people up for this. And then when we look at being fiscally responsible, because that's all some people care about, we can look and see how we waste money every day by incarcerating people instead of providing health care or education or something else that's going to be valuable for them. We're paying for trauma. We're paying for it. I really want us to feel that. You know, this is because in your heart you feel, oh no, in my heart I feel. No, your money say different. So if you feel if that burns you, I want you to go back home and get with the folks at the ACLU and get with folks in community to help work on fixing this issue. I'll stop right there.
For now.
Yeah, for now.
We are going to take some questions, so if you do have some, please feel free to stand up at the mic. I want to actually ask all of the panelists, knowing that most Unitarian Universalist congregations are often mostly white, and thus likely to be least affected by the issues we've been discussing this afternoon. What kind of role do you see them being able to play after they go home to their home communities? Not just to end money bail, but to really push the system where it needs to be pushed to. And where are the places that their resources, access, and support would be useful in your experiences? And we can start with Antonio, and then we'll just go right down the line.
Well, I feel like some of the things that could be done to help to rectify the situation would be the court sit-ins. That's something big that we have tried to push in Springfield. Just getting together, going to the court, and watching what happens in the courtroom. Because most of the people that this stuff is happening to, they're in there by themselves. They don't have any support. So that would be the most important thing to do. Just get a group together and start doing some courtroom sit-ins and get familiar with how court is supposed to be held, and and that would be it.
Thank you. That's great. Justice.
So Antonio is right, but with doing that, make sure that you get somebody to give you a good training on how to do that. Don't just go all willy-nilly up in the courtroom and okay. So what can you do? What can all souls in Kansas City do? You know, what we need right now is space to have some of our policy meetings. That would be really great. That's something I think that the church here could do for us. So providing space is always a thing that we need. And childcare, yes. I got some ideas. We need to have a meeting to talk more about that. If you're serious, reach out to me. Because I would like to have a smaller meeting with local people to talk more about what we can do. And some of that we can't say out loud right now. Okay.
So, Justice. So, you know, we are a nation of connected organizers. So each person sitting here, if they're not from Kansas City, there is a justice where they are, right? Mm-hmm. And he or she or they are doing incredible work.
Yes.
I think oftentimes the connections are not made.
Right.
And now the onus is not on the justices of the world to make those connections.
Hell no.
But
y'all
perhaps
time
you
me
can,
out. Emotional labor.
That's
I'm
right.
gonna start sending out invoices.
Exactly. But perhaps you can provide a little bit of insight into the best ways to connect with the justices of the world. That would be great to hear from.
So, you know, I always say, don't be presumptuous. Don't go in thinking you know something, because you probably don't. Talk to people honestly. Listen to people. Always, you know, something about a meal brings people together. Do something honest, you know, something simple. Don't expect that my community is just we're just going to tell you our ABC3 all through life, just in the first 2-3 meetings with you. That actually takes time to build. You can't skip that part either. There are people who skip that part. There are organizations, they never work. I tell them when they do it, I'll be like, you haven't done any relationship building. It's going to go flat in 6 months. I'm like, Justice, but we love the people we love. I'd be like, but they don't even know who you are and you love them. So you really do. The more you spend time with and relationship with other people, with people of color, the more it is you're going to be able to understand when things happen. It's gonna start hitting you a different way. You're gonna start feeling it a different way. And the other thing is, learn how to take direction from people of color. I mean, that is so important and so huge. We gonna free ourselves, okay? We might need your help along the way on this Underground Railroad, right? We might need you to house us a little bit or help with something else, but you ain't Harriet, okay? Know that. Okay.
Excellent. I'm going to let Ak talk a little bit. What?
Oh, wait. I feel like I'm really at a disadvantage, right? First of all, I'm not a speaker. And you put me behind her. It's just not fair. Now, what I have to say is what she said. Just get engaged and talk to marginalized people. Know where they're coming from. And like she says, just don't think you know on your own, because you don't, unless you walk our walk. Once again, be mindful. It's not right to follow her.
I just wanted to say, just to help with the black and white issue, Some of us as blacks, we do walk around with chips on our shoulders, and it has a lot to do with the pressures that are put on us. It's as simple as when y'all see us out in the street. I mean, you're gonna see some of us that don't look appeasing or appealing to you. It's just a little smile goes a long way. When we're walking past or we make connections with you, just a smile will help with the distance that's between us. And that's just really all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Okay.
They said a lot. I think one of the biggest things is no preconceived notions. You know, I know I remember I was walking into a business meeting. I was dressed in shirt. At the very least, it was a shirt and tie, maybe a jacket as well. And I was walking from my car to it was a coffee shop. And next thing I know, I walk by a car, and I hear, "Dee-dee." That was someone locking the doors of their vehicle. From I'm pretty sure it was from a dance studio that was across the street, who happened to see me walking by her vehicle. Preconceived notions. I was walking to a business meeting. So that's first and foremost, is realize that I'm a person just like you are. Okay. Secondly, don't pretend you're colorblind. Okay. Colorblindness is not a thing. God made color, and all of it's beautiful. Okay. So, I hear it all the time. It's like, I'm colorblind. No, you're not. Neither am I. God made us all who we are. And don't be scared of it. Acknowledge it, but be real. Be yourself. I used to be an Uber driver, and again, preconceived notions. I would let people play whatever music they want in my car, and they just automatically everybody. I might be picking someone up from a Garth Brooks concert, and they want to put on Snoop Dogg. I don't even listen to rap, really. But again, preconceived notions. When you come to meet with somebody, don't just automatically assume who they are. Just based off of what they're wearing, whatever. The other thing, just be there. Be there. Your face, your vote. Your everything is absolutely important. I'm part of a demographic that makes up only 13% of the population. Okay, so as much as we would love just our rallies and everything to be enough, it's not, because 13% of the population will never win. 13% of the vote never wins. Okay, so for you to be there and be prevalent, to know about our issues, have the hard conversation. Okay, I have a lot of conversations on Facebook. Sometimes they get pretty wild, but I don't shy away from them. Don't shy away from the hard conversations. Okay, and be open-minded. There's gonna be something. Hey, you might learn something about someone. So again, don't come with those preconceived notions of what you think things to be, based off of the shoes that you're walking in, because you might learn something about the shoes that someone else is in. There's absolutely a reason that the U.S. has 25%. U.S. makes up 25%
of the world's population.
25% of the world's prison population, yet what, 10% of the world's total population, or maybe even less than that. Yeah, our world, exactly. So I mean,
we are 5% of the global population.
We make up 5% of the global population, but 25% of the prison population. Yeah. African Americans make up 5% 45% of that prison population, yet only making up 13% of the total population. So in a country that we only make up 13% of the population, somehow we're 10% of the entire world's population. How is that? How is there a for-profit prison industry? How is there a for-profit prison industry and it still be costing taxpayers money? How can taxpayers be spending so much money on prisons, but yet the prison industry is for-profit? That's something that baffles me. I don't know.
We spend $80 billion a year to incarcerate people. $80 billion. In the U.S.? Yes. I could do a whole lot of good things with that. Like we would have health care for everybody, education. I mean, oh my God, what are we doing with our money? This is our money. This is our budget. We've let these rogue employees have at it long enough. 1 in 3 Black men will go to jail at least once in their life. 1 in 6 Hispanic men. When we talk about white folks, we're looking at 1 in 17. That's how far off that is.
Thank y'all. Again, if you have questions, I don't know if we had any online questions, but if you have questions, please come up to the podium. Thanks.
Sorry, I arrived a little late, so maybe you talked about this. It's my understanding that bail is basically set at the county level, or at least I think it is in Illinois. Is that the same as across the country? And also, not only is it at the county level, it's sort of at the judge's discretion. If somebody could talk about how that system works.
So typically how a person enters the system, they're stopped, right? There's an arrest of some sort. The arresting officer says you've committed this. I'm going to write you this ticket. We're going to take you to jail. Then the officer, there's another officer who looks at the charges and decides whether or not this is going to hold up or this is normally we can just go ahead and say they're going to back their buddy up because they are. That then moves to the district attorney. So some places refer to them as a DA. Some places refer to them as a prosecuting attorney. They are one and the same. So that person will decide whether or not to uphold these charges, whether to add more charges. They will also decide what the bond should be, if there is to be one, and present this to the judge. Judges typically do what prosecutors want. And so that normally flies right through. So when I tell you all about how important the role of the prosecutor is and why some work needs to be done there, that prosecutor has the most power almost out of everybody there. Judges tend to co-sign. They just tend to co-sign.
Thanks.
Did I answer your question? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you.
And in the juvenile justice system, it works fairly simple or fairly similarly, such as like my niece who doesn't have any type of violent history, no arrests, no anything like that. But the prosecutor suggested that she be remanded, and the judge went along with it.
Hi, my name is Hayden. I'm from Fairbanks, Alaska. My congregation is about 100 people, almost completely white people. We were trying to work on a project to start doing court sits, and I have 2 questions about that. One is we were hoping to show up for Black and Alaska Native folks and be there in court for them, and we were trying to figure out how we could find out which defendants would need our support the most, and we didn't have a clear picture of that. And we have 2 public defender agencies in Alaska, so we're thinking about talking to those attorneys. But the second question I have is you mentioned getting training, and that didn't even cross our mind that there would be somebody who would be available to train us, so I want to know more about how we can find out about that.
I would say contact your local ACLU. My executive director used to be Jeffrey Mittman used to be the executive director in Alaska. And so I'm sure that he has left some wonderful resources in their hands. And if they don't know, they can call me at my office, and I will send them some things. So contact them, tell them Justice sent you there, and they should help you.
And do you think it's important that we care about who we show up for, or just show up?
Absolutely. I mean, you want to center marginalized people. That's what we want to do. However, if there is an injustice to people, there is an injustice to people. And you can show up for that, too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, pardon me for being late. I'm Betty Holcomb. I'm from First Unitarian Society in Chicago. We have a very active show up for people for bail in Chicago. What I'd like to ask, in particular, the white people who are present here, in order to familiarize yourself with the arrest process in the world, in this United States, ask every single black person who you know what happened when you were arrested. Not were you arrested. What happened when you were arrested. I've been arrested at 22 years old for making an illegal left turn. I was taken to jail until I could reach my uncle to come and post bond for me in Chicago. I was terrified. I was terrified. And of course, I was let go.
Yeah.
But what if I hadn't been able to reach my uncle? So just ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. And Chicago is doing incredible work on bail reform. They're one of the centers of this work in the country, for sure.
You know, we can lose our lives. Sandra Bland was held pre-trial. She lost her life. As have many others who haven't had the publicity that Sandra has. There have been lots, and we haven't talked about that very much, about the loss of life, and while abuse. People are just waiting. You're right.
And abuse.
Tremendous abuse and trauma, while they are just waiting, have not been convicted. And I don't care if they were convicted. Nobody deserves to be abused or traumatized in jail.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
My name is Charlie Behrens. I'm from Orlando, Florida. And you talked about how much the bail bond system is making money. And I know this is a social justice issue, but under capitalism, we got to hit them where it hurts too, in the pocket. There's a lot of people you talked about who are losing money because all these people are going into jail. And I'm wondering if we can unite forces with the people who are losing money against the people who are making money. And I bet you we could get more people on the losing side to say, hey, we owe our money, we want our money, and hit the legislature with that. What do you think?
I don't quite understand.
I get what you're saying. I think it's dangerous to add a financial component in some aspects. Where I do think that there's room when you talk about the bail bondsman industry is that they are most often backed by big insurance.
Right.
Yeah.
And so where the pressure can be applied in that instance is in giving pressure to these insurance companies that are directly making money by backing the bail bondsman industry because y'all pay their premiums, right? All of us are the ones that keep big insurance in business, not the bail bondsmen, right? But this is just one kind of line item for them. And so there's pressure that can be applied in the private sector to stop this backing of big bail bondsmen. Right. This is an insidious. I really liken them to payday loans. This is how they function in our criminal justice system. And they are extremely exploitative and know that they are making money off of bodies. And they have, to them, every arrest is a dollar sign. And so where we can in the private sector put pressure on that system, I think is always really good.
Thanks.
You know
I didn't
what?
know they were part of the insurance
Yes.
Oh, yes.
industry.
You know
Okay.
what? This is a little. No, my husband knows. I actually thought about and considered and was on my way to becoming a bonds person. Had linked up with the agency. It's incredibly difficult to become one. I'm gonna tell you that right now. You have to be super connected. And so I had made that connection. I got that connection, and I was going to go ahead with it. However, something happened to make me stop. But I wanted to go into it because I was organizing at the time, and I was doing a whole lot of work on with the Mike Brown situation, and people were getting arrested. And I just wanted to get people out. That's why I was doing it. So I would have totally not been in it for the money. I would have just been getting people out. But it didn't work that way for me, and I never went that way with it. I'm always a little leery because when you said that, I was thinking, no, I don't see how that's going to work.
Yeah, but it would work like people that are losing, let's say, the rent. Okay, so you have a landlord now, and they now have someone who's delinquent on their rent. So there are pieces of our society that are losing, right? Because people are incarcerated. Not paying their bills. Not doing the things that they want to be doing and productive members of society. But I think it's tricky because under capitalism, putting a dollar amount to our worth is tricky.
Okay. I didn't understand it at all until just now.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Harvey Harris, and I'm from Des Moines, Iowa. And there's a couple of things, if you have time, I'd be interested in you addressing. When you talk about the juvenile system, for example, you didn't address the possibility of juvenile court diversion programs as one of the alternatives ways to keeping kids in any kind of juvenile prison. I'd also, if you've got the time, you haven't really addressed the ultimate powers of the bail bonds people. They have extraordinary judicial powers, as you know, which they exercise sometimes arbitrarily. And while you've alluded to it, a couple of you who have, $60,000, for example, I don't think you've also necessarily addressed the records that arrests become a record that can be used against you, the loss of children, and literally in the sense of being taken, and the accumulation of child support while you're in jail, which does not go away automatically. So there's a few, if you have time to look at those, I think people should hear those things.
Thank you for that. We are short on time, but I do appreciate all of those points, and I'll mention that they will be included in the Love Resists BLUU Toolkit they'll be putting together for our congregations. Obviously, we are abbreviated here in how much we can spend on every issue, but those are all of the ways in which incarceration takes its toll financially, emotionally, structurally to those that are caught up in this web. They are life-ending in many cases, and not just in the ways that they would be dead. This ends people's lives in many different functional ways.
Right.
Hi, David Reno, First Church of Boston. In the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, bail is under the courts, not individual people. So you might try looking up the Mass General laws on bail. We have bail commissioners who are people who work under the auspices of the court, and they are the ones who are the middlemen. They will come in, they will assess the bail, and then they will do it under the court. It is not the free enterprise system that they have other places. You might try looking into that. Other thing I would like to suggest is Professor Clark Mollenhoff, a reporter and lawyer, said, "In any investigation of corruption, follow the dollar." Let me recommend to your reading, if you have not read it, Jessica Mitford's book, Kind and Usual Punishment. Now, in 1963, Jessica Mitford wrote a famous book on the funeral industry called The American Way of Death. And 10 years later, she wrote a book on the prison industry. Follow the dollar and consider how many rural communities no longer have agricultural workers because of John Deere, no longer have industrial workers because the jobs went to Mexico or China. You have all these people with no jobs. They say, put a prison there. Fine. The prison's not going to go anywhere. Consider the dollar and consider the other fact that people in prison are counted as part of the population. There's a lot more to it to that, but I will just give you her book. It's dated, but still, pick up where she left off, and I must go to my assigned case right now. But that is some food for thought. In any investigation of corruption, as Professor Mullenhoff said, follow the dollar. See where the money comes from, see where the money goes. And if we have private businesses, what happens if they go bankrupt? They're just going to open the door and say, sorry, we ran out of money, go.
Thank you.
Jessica Midford's Kind and Usual Punishment, subtitled The Prison Business. If you see it as a business, it makes perfect economic sense.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Bergeron. I'm also from Boston, the West Roxbury neighborhood. I'm a member of Theodore Parker Church. I think I messed this up there. I actually have two questions, if I may. One is that I was surprised and shocked to hear that if you accept bail, then you can't have a public defender. I don't know if that's widespread. The gentleman who just spoke probably would know whether or not Massachusetts would allow that, but it seems to me that's unconstitutional, that we have both rights, you know, to be able to be bailed out and to have a defense. So I would like that addressed.
Let's stop. So the reason that is, this is what they say, is because you showed means. If you could post bond, that means that you showed means. If you have a public defender, that means that you were indigent, you didn't have any money. And so that's how they're using it. One thing that we didn't I want to address, throughout the states, the systems are different, okay? There are going to be differences with all. That's why you need to get familiar with how yours is run. The other thing is, some places do or don't have the bail bondsman. It is through the courts. The other thing I want to say about through the courts is bonds through the courts, if you pay them all the way out, and usually people of color can't do that, they get the money back. So if you are a person of means and you paid it through the court, you can buy your charge, and then afterwards you get your money back. It's a lot of nuances with this that we just are not going to be able to cover in this amount of time. You know, we know this affects voting rights. We know how they're messing around with the population numbers and counting prisoners. And we know about these rural counties doing all of this. It's a whole lot. And we're trying to give you as much as we can in this little bit. But that means that you have got to go back and do some more research. Make sure that you pay attention to what BLUU puts out there about this. There's a lot of reading to do about this, and a lot of in particulars. That's why there is an ACLU in every state, because we have to work on the particulars. What will work in Missouri won't work in California.
Thank you.
The other thing I was just going to ask about was, Antonio, you said that you'd been accused of crimes that never even happened. And I was wondering if that's because there was a particular vendetta against you by the police, or whether that was, you know, it's just always going on, that, you know, so.
Well,
thank you.
That particular time, that was something that I believe was just against me. But there are situations where I wasn't necessarily, I was just taken to jail and the charges were dropped. I mean, so that's a big part of what we deal with as blacks. They can pick you up for anything and say you did anything, and then you have to bond out and you have to get a lawyer, and then when you go to court, the charges just be dropped, and then the money is just gone. So it's something that happens on a daily basis.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I know that's something that you've dealt with a lot and also counsel others around.
Well, basically what he said. First of all, I can speak personally. My offense a lot of time was just being black. And we are seen as a dollar sign. And any way they can get $1 out of us is their practice. Man, there's so much with that.
The new slave. I mean,
Well,
Yeah.
keep the plantation.
Well, let's just keep this in mind that this whole system is built off the slave patrol. This is why it was made up from the beginning. So, yeah, like really, we're just a dollar sign, and there's so many instances and so many situations that the end of it is the dollar. Whether they can incarcerate you, whether they can get, if you have money, then they don't need to incarcerate you. They just got some money from you. If you don't have any money, then they incarcerate you and get money on the back end from you. You know, all you have to do is be locked up, award of the state for 90 days, and I think they get something like $80,000 a year for you. But you don't have to be there 90 days. So they can hold you up, and I have been to prison for 30 days just to get evaluated, just to get blood work, just to get checked in, and then let me right out. Just to get that 80,000. So at the end of the day, we're just dollar signs.
I think it's
However
important.
you can provide it.
Thank you so much. I think it's important too. I think the previous question mentioned the Constitution. I think it's really important to note that when you go to prison, you lose all of your constitutional rights.
Yeah, you're a ward of the state.
So you don't actually have any of the rights that we who are not incarcerated think that we have. I say think because that's whatever.
And I don't think you're even I don't know, the states that I've been in, you're not even counted when you're in there. Like your state
yeah,
property.
state property. You disappear pretty much.
Yes.
This whole wild black thing, I've never actually been to jail on a criminal charge. I've been to jail, but for traffic infractions and so on and so forth. This whole wild black thing is totally legit. Again, with my conversations on Facebook, I've talked to some of my white friends about how they're oppressed for being, Jewish America or Christian and Americans or whatever, so on and so forth. I'm like, well, people can't see your Jewish American on your face when they look at you, or they can't see your Christian just by looking at you. I've been I can remember one time I was driving, with a handful of friends of mine, and I looked over. The police officer was actually about to pass me on the road, looks over at me, and slows down and pulls me over. And supposedly at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, I fit the description of a bank robbery that had happened in a minivan. In the minivan I was driving, and somehow, I had a handful of people in the car with me. Not all of them were black like myself, but I was the only one that was searched for a bank robbery. But somehow I was searched, not for money or any type of bank robbery type things. They had me take my shoes off looking for drugs and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, as far as this whole wild black thing is legit. The good thing is I didn't have any drugs on me, or anything like that. And I was let go, but, this whole, wild black thing is, it's absolutely traumatizing. I was on the side of the road with people driving by just looking at me,
I've had drugs planted on me. I have been. I'm from Greenwich, Connecticut, and most of my friends pretty much look like y'all. Just being honest. And I have been in the car graduation night, and my friend James Jafofka was drunk, and he was driving, and I was in the back seat, and there's 4 other of my friends, and I was the only one who went to jail. James didn't go to jail. Scott didn't go to jail. Wayne didn't go to jail. Robert didn't go to jail. Just me.
Just you.
And I got charged with the DUI. And if it wasn't for my mother and my uncle that knew some people, my mother was kind of popular there. She was a caterer. She cooked for a lot of famous people, so she called some favors in, and it just automatically disappeared. But had I not had that, I would have been had a DUI, and that's just because I was black.
Yeah.
Actually, my mom's friend who got me out of it told her that that was the case, because they had depended on somebody, and I was the most likely candidate to do it.
Jolanda.
Hey, my name is Jolanda. I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana, the state that knows how to put black folks in jail very well, unfortunately. First off, I want to thank y'all for sharing your trauma with us. You were held in love and hope you're taken care of. My question is the difference, the states that only have bail and the states, I believe like mine, that have bail and bond. We're taking baby steps, like we just started showing up for court, and amazingly, the power of white people wearing Black Lives Matter shirts that cost $20 in court will change the lives of black men. And so I know Massachusetts only has bail, and because they only have bail, the bail is lower, therefore it's easier to bail people out. So I was wondering if you had any advice on people from states, how do we get rid of bonds and be, convert to only having bail?
Your face, Justice.
I'm going to refer you to the ACLU. You need to get with them. They have enrolled a Smart Justice campaign, which has the goal of reducing mass incarceration by 50%. And so all of these states are part of that. For more, I don't want to give you advice about your state, and I'm unclear. I want to send you to people who know. And they've been working there doing this work. You should get with them, connect with them, and form a partnership with them. Tell them Justice sent you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jolanda.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have one time for one more. I would like, well,
I think we had an online question. We were trying to get some folks from online that were asking some questions.
Okay. So, I also wanted to mention that there is a great organization called Court Watch NOLA. Court Watch NOLA in New Orleans, Louisiana. So I did want to take a second to ask a question, just to bring us all back and ground us a little bit. A lot of the suggestions that were being made about engagement from white UUs in particular was centered a lot around kind of having conversations. I feel like a lot of us are really great at that. Are there any more examples of some more tangible things that folks can do? And also, how can allies be responsible in doing work with bailouts that does not mean co-opting doing that bailout work?
So, I did that here, and I had to manage that. So I had an honest conversation with allies and asked some of them, you got to move from a space of being an ally to a co-conspirator. Get your hands a little bit dirtier with me. Because y'all don't want to get your hand dirty. But it's okay. No, it's not. Move from a space of being an ally to a co-conspirator. But what can you do? Usually, I know we have a list of things that can be done. And so those small things, what we consider small things, they add up to be a whole lot. Those are things that you can do. You can go to the store and get supplies. You can go get items that we need. Those things that help us to carry on our work, those are important. Ask people of color what they want you to do. They may ask you, sometimes we've asked white folks to do certain things, and then I get some person of color calling me, be like, Justice, these white people over here doing that. I'll be like, yes, I know. I know. It's okay.
I sent them.
I've sent them to do that. And so with that I will tell you on our side, that can be tricky because we always want to make sure that our people are centered and that all of that is okay. And so you may find yourself moving from a space of just providing some snacks or doing this to being more included. It just depends on how your relationship grows with these groups. I'll tell you, I have a friend right now who I would say a year ago, she was at a very white meeting. It was a bunch of white people there, and I was like, there's no black people here. And she was like, I'm doing this work and I'm engaged and and then she was like, but I don't know what to do. And then I was like, well, if you're engaged and you're doing this work and you don't know what to do, that tells me that you're not engaged enough and you're not doing this work enough and you're not. And she was just like, okay. And I will tell you, she and I have become the best of friends. Because we moved because she didn't just take that and get upset with me and be like, Justice gets on my nerves, or Justice is too tough on me, or she started going to meetings. She started asking, what can I do? She started doing what people told her to do. The more she did that, the more and more we trusted her. The more and more we felt like she can be in our space. The more and more, I know people look down, it'd be a whole bunch of black folks, black and brown folks and her. And they be trying to figure out, but it's because she's earned her space there. It's not going to be given to you. You got to kind of earn that space there because it's about trust, because it's about we've been traumatized. It's because we might hear some offensive words from y'all about the experiences we've had. And we don't need to hear that. So there's a level of how far we're going to let you in. And when we start to feel like you get this, you understand what's happening here, we can let you in more. So your lists are going to change. Your demands and what people ask you are going to change depending upon your relationship with people. That's what I have to add to that.
I would just say, and this is something I suggest everybody do, regardless, but it's particularly useful for UU communities and for UUs generally speaking, is to do an assessment of the resources that you have to offer to people. Mm-hmm. I tell folks that want to be good allies that they should have a menu of services and resources that they're willing to make available to Black organizers, and they should carry it on their person at all times. So when they meet one, they can hand it to them. One of the most dangerous things is to have an idea in your mind of what you want to do for somebody else. Mm-hmm. In this work, that doesn't really work very well. So what you need to do is be very clear on what you have to offer and make sure that those people that might be able to utilize those things are aware. Mm-hmm. And then you wait until they're ready to actually utilize those things. They will let you know. And you need to make sure that you provide a way for them to get in touch with you too. So if you say, I can help with resume building, I'm just going to throw out some random things. Mm-hmm. So then it should say, if you want help with your resume, you should email me at this email address or give me a call and I'll help you with your resume, for example. And that works for a lot of different areas, but it certainly works in the context of this. And so what I would say is your congregation should spend some time assessing what it's willing to do. Are you willing to offer meeting space and childcare and food for meetings to take place for these organizations to hold at your space? Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. That's a conversation you should be having before engaging so that you're very clear on what you're bringing to the table when you have these initial outreach conversations with folks. So that's why I would suggest that everybody start off with is really having an honest, open dialogue with each other within your congregations about what are you willing to do. A lot of times in our faith, things end up being pet projects within our congregations, right? There'll be like one or two people that feel really strong about something. And we haven't taken the time to make sure our whole congregation is on the same page about an issue and all willing to be engaged on it at all levels. So fundraising, membership, youth, everything should be involved if it's something that your congregation feels strongly about. And so it takes time to build those things. And in the process of that, that's the work that we talk about all the time, right? What is the work? That's what the work is. So that would be my answer to your question, Paige. Hopefully that's good.
That was great.
Well, thank you again to all of my panelists. Please give them a round of applause. I'm so grateful for them. I want to just reiterate, you'll be getting a lot more information from BLUU and from Love Resists about our congregation-specific and money bail toolkit. We're going to have some modules that you'll be able to plug into and really utilize within your congregations. And also make sure you stop by Hall D to help us build these 1,000 domestic violence survivor care packages. We want to get that done. The Reale Justice Network, they are the recipients of those packages.
Thank you
so we
so
really
much.
want to make sure that we get those done for them this week. And one more thing.
We're at,
It's all day. You can stop right in Hall D. Just go right through. It takes just a few minutes to build a couple of care packages.
right now, we're at 600 care
Oh my
packages.
gosh.
Oh my gosh. We're all more than halfway done. It's been a day. I'm so excited. Okay. Wow. I'm going to be floating on that number for a few hours now. Thank y'all so much for
Thank
coming. I really
you.
appreciate it. Thanks for everybody at home. Thank you.
Well, you did very well, sir.
You need to stop stealing the show.